So review catch-up week part 2. We're doing another week of reviews. Probably won't do 3 like last week because I don't want to burn myself out. But there are 2 big movies or big release popular talked about movies that I want to cover. One of which being the movie we're going to talk about today, which is Infinity Pool. Now I almost skipped this movie. I had actually made a decision after this movie was released and I heard about what kind of movie it was. And a lot of you warning me that you're probably not going to like this movie because of the content in it. So despite my initial excitement for this movie, I had written it off. I was like, it's not for me. I'm not going to review it. I'm not going to watch it. Then it became available to purchase on Prime, and the turnaround time has just been so fast lately with Megan coming out like in the same month on streaming, or at least I forgot how to watch that one. Anyway, and then Infinity Pool, I think is still in theaters, and now it's available for at-home viewing, and I was just tempted. So I am happy I ended up watching it. It definitely wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. It was initially given an NC-17 rating for the content, and then they appealed for an R rating, which was denied, so then they re-edited it to pass for an R rating, which is what we see. I'm sure when a DVD release happens or a Blu-ray release, we'll get an unrated cut somewhere, or at least see the deleted scenes, but I'm kind of glad that they edited it down for an R rating because personally I don't want much more than what's in this movie. Guided by a seductive and mysterious woman, a couple on vacation venture outside the resort grounds and find themselves in a culture filled with violence, hedonism, and untold horror. A tragic accident soon leaves them facing a zero-tolerance policy for crime. Either you'll be executed, or if you're rich enough to afford it, you can watch yourself die instead. I remember reading that synopsis before the movie was released, and I was like, what the heck does that even mean? What does it mean to, what do you mean watch yourself die? Like, but the concept in the movie I think is really cool, and I really enjoyed like the setup and the premise of this movie and the story build up and like that concept of watching yourself die or be executed, basically. So this movie is, of course, directed by Brandon Cronenberg, son of David Cronenberg. And Brandon directed Possessor, which I really enjoyed. I thought Possessor was a really strong movie and highly underrated. So if you've yet to see it, it's streaming on Hulu. Please go check it out because it is so good. I think it's better than Infinity Pool, but I do think people will disagree with that because Possessor's a little bit more smaller budget, I would say. Smaller movie in general. So what's interesting is Infinity Pool actually made more money its opening week than Crimes of the Future did its entire theatrical release, which of course Crimes of the Future is directed by his father, David Cronenberg. So the question is Brandon Cronenberg bound to be a little bit, not more successful, but as successful as his father? Because so far it's showing some promise here. I will say I think Brandon Cronenberg is a little bit more for me than David Cronenberg movies are. I don't want to compare the two, but I do see this pattern of father-son situations where the son is doing the same thing that the father is and then does the same exact style of thing. So another example of this is Joe Hill and Stephen King. I feel like Joe Hill, you know, he writes horror, but he writes very similarly, in my opinion, to his father. And I wish that they kind of branched out and did their own thing. They're unique in some ways, but at the end of the day, they're still doing kind of the same thing that their dad is doing. And I think Brandon Cronenberg does this too. It's very reminiscent of David Cronenberg's movies. So let's get into my thoughts about this movie. I think it will surprise some of you, especially those of you who reached out and warned me, which, by the way, I really do appreciate when you reach out to me and say, this movie may not be for you. Just watch out for the, you know, triggers in it or whatever, the content in it. I think it's so thoughtful that you think of me when you watch movies. But I actually liked this movie. I did end up liking this movie a lot. I have a lot of things that I don't like about it, and I will tell you every single one of them shortly, but generally, I really like this movie. I think it's a really strong movie. I woke up in the morning after watching it, liking it more than when I went to bed that night. I was intrigued by this story the entire time. I was so curious what was happening and where it was gonna go, and Mia Goth, just in general, is so captivating whenever she's on the screen. You just can't take your eyes off of her. Now, of course, Infinity Pool is an artistic movie. It's very artistically done. There are some shots that are not going to be for everyone, and I kind of did roll my eyes sometimes at some of the scenes because it's like, all right, we get it. You're weird. It's a weird movie. We get it. But when it wasn't weird for weird's sake, it was pretty strong. Like, I liked the story and like the set and obviously the cast and things like that. Like everything was pretty strong about this movie, but it's not going to be for everyone, right? If you're not generally a fan of artsy fartsy movies, probably not going to love this one. Although I do think it's not that artsy. Like I think Crimes of the Future takes the cake when comparing the two when it comes to like artistic movies. I think Crimes just gets way weirder and not in a good way. Now, I'm not usually a fan of jump scares, but there's one jump scare in this movie and I actually really appreciated it. I know this is so random because it's like one scene, but it makes it feel more down to earth. I don't normally love jump scares, but in an artistic movie like this, I just respect it. It was placed smartly and it felt a little bit more, like I said, down to earth. It made it, back in reality of like, okay, we're watching a horror movie and not just some like weird art house film, Also, I'm really happy they had a full moment for the masks in this movie. Again, small point, but I just want to say it because I really love the masks in this movie, and I'm glad that we get a full scene of just highlighting the masks. Like, it's just showing you mask after mask. Now, I say I enjoyed the story. I do wish there was a little bit more. I wish we got to know the other people a little bit more, the other characters. I feel like a lot of the side characters were nobodies and just filler. Like, you could just tell that this movie was just Mia Goth and Alexander Skarsgard. Like that was it. That's the movie. Those are the characters. The other ones are very much on the sidelines, including his wife, just very irrelevant. So I wanted a little bit more, and I could see this movie pushing another 30 minutes onto us. Like I could see that if they developed some of the characters a little bit more and showed more nuances there, it would have been stronger, but then we would have been pushing 2.5 hours, which to me feels fair for a movie like this. Normally I would not say that, but I just feel like this one needed a little bit more expansion. Maybe take away some of the weird scenes, add some more character nuances in there. But I was interested. I was still interested in the story the entire time, so I guess it did its job. I don't know. There is body horror, all right. That is definitely how I would describe some of the scenes in this. Gory, very disturbing at times. Not in my kind of way of disturbing. As you can tell, I don't know how to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. Just weird. Just not my type of body horror. Kind of reminiscent of his father. I'm just gonna say that. So let's get into the things in this movie that I feel were a little bit off for me. They weren't detrimental to the story. I still liked this movie overall, but it definitely had a lot of things wrong with it, in my opinion, that I noticed. So firstly, the character James, played by Alexander Skarsgard, I feel like he was just so passive. Like, he was so quick to agree to every single thing that they told him to do. I just feel like he was a little too easy to manipulate, and maybe it had to do with the fact, of his character. It's himself, like the type of desperation he had and being in an unfamiliar setting. Maybe those things contributed to him just agreeing to everything so quickly. But he had zero agency as a person, and that was a little bit frustrating to watch. Again, but just too nice. Too much of a people pleaser for people that you don't really know that well. And I understand he's seduced by Mia Goth's character and wrapped into this weirdness, and he wanted some excitement in his life, clearly. But he just went along with every single thing a little bit too quickly, a little too easy, Have a little hesitation there, because some of the things, obviously, it's just weird. It goes a little too far. So my main issue with this movie, which brings it down a lot for me personally, are the effects. Very repetitive, and not just repetitive in the movie Infinity Pool, repetitive of Possessor. So Brandon Cronenberg clearly has a style that he likes, and it was so effective for me in Possessor. Loved it. Disturbing, weird, thought the effects were so good. But then he did the exact same thing in Infinity Pool, and that kind of takes away from it for me, because the effects were so impressive and new and interesting. And then when you just repeat that in every movie that you do, kind of makes it not as exciting. When the scenes were happening that were very reminiscent of Possessor, it was just yeah, we've seen it before. They're good. Don't get me wrong. If you've never seen Possessor, they're going to be very great in this movie for you. I don't know if that's nitpicky, because people do have a style. People have a type of editing and cinematography that they like to do, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's almost like the exact same scenes. It felt like same visuals. So for me, that was a little bit disappointing. There were like 3 scenes, I would say, 3 scenes I would remove from this movie and then I would like it so much more, but that is a very personal thing because those scenes were just plain weird. Weird for weird's sake. Again, that's my personal preference. I'm not saying that we need to like get rid of bizarre movies in general, but just my personal preference. I would have preferred those scenes not be as weird. So I'm not sure if I like missed a bigger meaning here in this movie, but it did leave me questioning what was the point? Like, why did we do any of that? Why did we go through all of that? What was the point of it? Again, I feel like they could have developed a little bit more story there, maybe included some of the characters a little bit more to further explain why everything is happening this way. But just generally, it felt pointless, not pointless, but just why? Like, why? I think the reasoning would be kind of a spoiler if I talked about it, so I'm not going to. But I think it is pretty simple unless there's a bigger meaning. So if you found like a deep meaning within this movie, please let me know. In fact, it's mostly the one scene at the very, very end. If you know which one I'm talking about. The very last weird scene, you know? And up until that point, I was like, all right, it's not so bad. It's not that weird. And then that one happened and I was like, all right. Let's just be a little bit more weird. Like, why not? Like, I wish that scene was not in it because I feel like it would have been so much stronger with the other weird scenes. I could tolerate the other weird scenes, some of which are hard to look at. But then we have the last one and I'm like, okay, why? Why are we doing that? What's going on? How many times am I gonna say weird in this video? Like, I feel like a lot of things just felt random. Like, the movie in general felt random. Like, what's the point? You know, like, it's just random things happening. Also, I think it took itself a little bit too seriously. I wish there was a little bit more of a fun element. Like if it was edited or filmed in a way that was like Duel or Lobster, both really great movies that have like that dry humor behind it, that would have added so much to this movie, I think. I don't think that's Brandon Cronenberg's style, so like I'm not gonna put that on him, but I do feel like a little bit of humor would have added to it. There was like a little bit of lightness here and there. Like some of the cut scenes, you know, were funny. Like it would jump to like one scene and then it's kind of a funny transition, you know what I mean? But just generally some dry humor would have added a lot to this. But I think some would disagree. I think some would say it would take away from the suspensefulness and like the horror of everything that's happening. But generally I don't find this movie truly horrific. Like, yes, there's body horror and suspense, but it's like not a scary movie, you know, which I feel like we're getting more and more of those these days, which I'm for. I like the artistic movies generally and the ones that make you think and like ask what is the point, you know? So despite all of those negatives, I still really like this movie. I could see myself rewatching it, knowing which scenes are coming and just I'll look away, you know, no thank you. Although now that I've seen them, I feel like I'm just gonna be like immune to them because I know what happens. The first time it's like, okay, that's shocking. But I do recommend giving it a chance if you like artistic movies, or Mia Goth, obviously, Alex Skarsgard. They were fantastic in this, like usual. I will say my partner was not a fan of this movie and did not like Mia Goth's performance in this, and Pearl was his favorite movie last year, so it's not anything personal to Mia Goth, but he thought that her acting was really bad. So I just wonder if anyone else thinks that. Like, let me know if you liked Mia Goth's performance in this, because it is kind of becoming iconic again on TikTok, and people are, you know, soundbiting her and things like that on TikTok like they did with Pearl. So I think if not for the specific casting that they did for this and the story overall, this would have been way too weird of a movie for me. And I think that's why Crimes of the Future just really was not, that was my least favorite movie last year. Well, kind of second place least favorite movie last year, because I didn't enjoy the cast and the story in general was just too bizarre for me. So this one felt like a realistic story, down to earth story, and then we add weird elements, and I think that's the balance that I'm looking for. I'm not sure why I like this so much, because if you know anything about me and my preferences, you would immediately think this is not my kind of movie, but I'm not going to overthink it. I'm not going to think too much into it as to why I like this movie. I just do. It's just good performances, and I was captivated by what was happening. So that's all you need. Let me know if you've seen Infinity Pool and your general thoughts on it. It's probably going to be one of the weirder ones of the entire year, but it was strong. I would give it 3.5, 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5. Rewatchable, yes. Definitely entertaining, but weird for weird's sake. That's how I'd wrap that up. So let me know all your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.